The morning fog hung thick over San Francisco as Marcus Williams pushed his cleaning cart through the empty corridors of Chase Center. At 52, he'd been working as a janitor for nearly 3 decades, starting at small venues before landing this job at the Warriors' home arena 2 years ago. His weathered hands gripped the mop handle as he hummed an old Marvin Gaye tune, finding peace in the routine that others might consider mundane. Marcus took pride in his work. Every spot he cleaned, every surface he polished was done with care. He knew the players' names, their stats, their families' stories from overhearing conversations in the hallways. Basketball had always been his escape. Growing up in Oakland, he dreamed of playing professionally. But life had other plans. A knee injury in high school, followed by his father's sudden death, forced him to drop out and work to support his mother and younger sister. "Morning, Marcus," called out Jenny, one of the security guards, as she made her rounds. "Morning, Jenny. You're here early today," Marcus replied with his characteristic warm smile, the kind that made everyone feel like they mattered. "Big day today. They're filming some promotional stuff before the game. Lots of media people coming through." Marcus nodded, continuing his work. He'd seen plenty of media days come and go. The reporters rarely acknowledged the cleaning staff, treating them like part of the furniture. It didn't bother him much anymore. He'd learned to find his worth from within, not from others' recognition. As the morning progressed, the arena began to fill with the controlled chaos of preparation. Camera crews set up equipment, sound technicians tested microphones, and various media personnel scurried about with clipboards and coffee cups. The Warriors were having a stellar season, and today's pre-game coverage was expected to draw significant viewership. Rick Patterson, a sports reporter for Channel 7 News, strutted into the arena like he owned the place. At 35, Rick had built his career on provocative commentary and a willingness to say what others wouldn't. His blonde hair was perfectly styled, his suit expensive, and his attitude reflected someone who believed his own hype. He'd been covering Bay Area sports for 8 years, but his recent contract renewal had gone to his head. "This place better be spotless," Rick muttered to his cameraman Dave as they surveyed the arena. "We can't have any distractions during my segment." Dave, a quiet man in his 40s who'd worked with Rick for 3 years, simply nodded while adjusting his equipment. He'd learned that agreeing with Rick was easier than dealing with his tantrums. As they set up near center court, Marcus continued his methodical cleaning of the upper concourse. The morning sun had finally broken through the fog, streaming through the arena's massive windows and casting long shadows across the polished floors. He moved with quiet efficiency, occasionally pausing to ensure a particularly stubborn scuff was completely removed. Rick was reviewing his notes when he noticed Marcus in the background of their test shots. The janitor's presence irritated him. This was supposed to be a professional broadcast, not amateur hour. "Hey," Rick called out, his voice echoing through the arena. "Can we get the help to move out of frame? This is a live television broadcast, not a cleaning commercial." Marcus looked up, realizing Rick was addressing him. He raised his hand apologetically and began to move his cart away from the area. "Sorry about that," Marcus said politely. "I'll be out of your way in just a minute." But Rick was already in performer mode, the kind of mindset that had made him successful but also deeply unpopular among his colleagues. He saw an opportunity for what he considered authentic content, the kind of unscripted moment that could go viral and boost his profile. "Actually, wait," Rick said, a calculated smile spreading across his face. "Dave, keep rolling. This might be good." Dave hesitated but continued filming as Rick approached Marcus, microphone in hand. The arena's acoustics picked up every word, and unbeknownst to Rick, his segment was being broadcast live to a regional audience as part of the morning sports wrap-up. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here live at Chase Center," Rick began, his television voice smooth and confident. "And it looks like we've stumbled upon the real MVP of this organization." He gestured toward Marcus with exaggerated enthusiasm. "Sir, what's your name?" Marcus, caught off guard by suddenly being on camera, straightened up nervously. He wasn't comfortable with attention, especially the kind that felt manufactured. "Marcus Williams, sir." "Marcus Williams, everyone," Rick announced to the camera. And Marcus, how long have you been, Rick made a show of looking around at the cleaning supplies. Mastering the art of floor maintenance? A few arena employees who had gathered to watch the broadcast began to shift uncomfortably. Jenny, the security guard, shook her head in disgust, recognizing the setup for what it was. About 30 years in cleaning, 2 years here, Marcus replied simply, maintaining his dignity despite the obvious mockery in Rick's tone. 30 years. Wow. Rick's voice dripped with false admiration. And tell us, Marcus, what's your secret to achieving such mediocrity? I mean, it takes real dedication to spend 3 decades pushing a mop around, doesn't it? The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. He'd faced discrimination and dismissal before, but never so publicly, never with such calculated cruelty. His jaw tightened slightly, but his voice remained steady. I take pride in honest work, sir. Someone's got to keep things clean. Rick laughed, and it wasn't a pleasant sound. Of course, very noble, and I'm sure your parents are just so proud of their son's astronomical achievements in, what would you call this, sanitation engineering? Dave, behind the camera, felt sick to his stomach. He'd worked with Rick through plenty of controversial moments, but this felt different. This was just mean-spirited bullying of a man who was simply trying to do his job. Marcus's hands tightened on the mop handle. The mention of his parents brought back a flood of memories. His father working 2 jobs to support the family, his mother cleaning houses while going to night school to become a nurse. They'd taught him that all honest work had dignity, that a person's worth wasn't measured by their job title, but by their character. My parents taught me to work hard and treat people with respect, Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that Rick completely missed. Respect? Absolutely, Rick continued, his performance gaining momentum. And I'm sure the Warriors organization really values having someone who's, let's see, what's the opposite of overqualified? He turned to the camera with a smirk. Folks, this is what we call job security in America. Finding something so simple that literally anyone can do it. The word stung, but Marcus had developed thick skin over the years. What hurt more was the laughter he could hear from some of the media personnel who had gathered to watch. These were people he saw every game day, people he'd thought might see him as more than just part of the scenery. I imagine the complex, strategic decisions really keep you up at night, Rick continued. Paper towels or cloth? Pine Sol or Mr. Clean? The weight of such choices must be overwhelming. Marcus looked directly into the camera, his dignity intact despite the assault on it. Every job matters, sir. Everyone deserves respect, regardless of what they do for a living. Rick paused for a moment, and for just an instant, Dave thought his colleague might recognize the grace and wisdom in Marcus's response. Instead, Rick doubled down. Well, there you have it, folks. Profound wisdom from the intellectual giant of Chase Center Janitorial Services. Rick's smile was razor-sharp. Marcus, I hate to break up this riveting philosophical discussion, but some of us have real work to do. Important work. The kind that actually matters. As Rick turned back toward the camera to wrap up his segment, Marcus quietly resumed his cleaning. His movements were perhaps a bit stiffer now, his shoulders carrying the weight of public humiliation, but he continued his work with the same methodical care as always. What none of them knew was that across the Bay Area, thousands of people were watching this exchange unfold live. Social media began buzzing immediately, with viewers expressing outrage at Rick's behavior. The clip was being shared and reshared, but more importantly, it was being watched by someone with the power to do something about it. In his Atherton home, Stephen Curry had been getting ready for the team's morning practice while his wife Aisha prepared breakfast for their children. The TV was on in the background, tuned to the local sports coverage, when Rick's voice caught his attention. As the segment progressed, Steph's expression darkened. He knew Marcus, not well, but enough to know he was a good man who took pride in his work and always had a kind word for everyone. Steph had often noticed how Marcus would work quietly around the team areas, never intrusive but always thorough, always professional. Aisha, look at this, Steph called, his voice tight with anger. As they watched Rick's cruel performance together, Aisha shook her head in disgust. That's horrible. That poor man. Steph was already reaching for his phone. He had a few hours before practice, and suddenly, he had a much more important place to be. Stephen Curry's Tesla moved silently through the San Francisco streets as he headed toward Chase Center. The radio was off. He needed to think, to process what he'd just witnessed, and decide how to handle it. The three-time NBA champion had faced his share of critics and media provocateurs, but what he'd just seen wasn't sports commentary or even unfair criticism. It was pure cruelty directed at a man who couldn't defend himself. Steph thought about his own journey to NBA stardom, remembering the countless people who had supported him along the way. Coaches, trainers, equipment managers, and yes, custodial staff who had created the environment where he could excel. He thought about his father Dell's teachings about treating everyone with dignity, regardless of their position. Most importantly, he thought about the platform he'd been given and the responsibility that came with it. By the time he pulled into the Chase Center parking garage, Steph had made his decision. Meanwhile, Rick Patterson was feeling quite pleased with himself. The segment had generated immediate buzz on social media, and his phone was buzzing with notifications. His producer had already called to congratulate him on the authentic content, and Rick was basking in what he assumed was positive attention. That was television gold, Rick told Dave as they prepared for their next segment. Real, unscripted human interest. That's what separates good reporters from great ones. Dave, who had been checking his own social media feeds, wasn't so sure. The comments he was seeing weren't celebrating Rick's performance. They were condemning it. Words like disgusting, bullying, and heartless dominated the responses. But Dave knew better than to contradict Rick when he was in this mood. Marcus had moved to cleaning the lower concourse, trying to stay out of sight while processing what had just happened. He'd faced plenty of disrespect over the years, but never so publicly, never with such calculated malice. Part of him wanted to go home, to call in sick for the rest of the week, and avoid the stares and whispers that were sure to follow. But Marcus Williams wasn't built that way. He'd never run from anything in his life, and he wasn't about to start now. Marcus, Jenny approached him with concern written all over her face. I saw what happened up there. That was completely out of line. It's all right, Jenny, Marcus replied, though his voice carried the weight of the humiliation. Some people just need to feel big by making others feel small. No, it's not all right, Jenny insisted. Someone should report this. That was harassment, plain and simple. Before Marcus could respond, a commotion near the main entrance caught their attention. A small crowd was gathering, phones were coming out, and excited voices could be heard echoing through the arena. Stephen Curry had arrived. Dressed casually in jeans and a Warriors pullover, Steph moved through the arena with purpose. He'd called ahead to make sure the TV crew was still there, and now he was looking for two people, Rick Patterson and Marcus Williams. Excuse me, Steph approached one of the arena staff members. Do you know where I can find Marcus, the gentleman who was just on TV? The staff member's eyes widened in recognition. Mr. Curry, he's down on the lower level, I think. Is everything okay? Everything's about to be, Steph replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Word traveled fast in the arena that Stephen Curry was there looking for Marcus. Within minutes, a crowd had gathered at a respectful distance. Everyone's phones, recording as they sensed something significant was about to happen. Rick, upon hearing that Curry was in the building, immediately went into overdrive. This was exactly the kind of opportunity he lived for, an impromptu interview with one of the NBA's biggest stars. He quickly had Dave set up the camera and began practicing his introduction. Dave, this is perfect, Rick said, adjusting his tie. Curry showing up unannounced. This is the kind of exclusive content that makes careers. When Steph found Marcus near the team store, quietly wiping down display cases. The contrast between the superstar athlete and the humble janitor couldn't have been more stark. Yet as Steph approached, it was clear who commanded the real respect in this arena. Marcus? Steph's voice was gentle, respectful. Marcus looked up, startled to see the Warriors' star player standing in front of him. Mr. Curry, is everything all right? Do you need something? Actually, I do need something, Steffi replied, extending his hand for a shake. "I need to apologize." Marcus, confused, shook Steph's hand. "Apologize? For what, sir? For what just happened to you upstairs? That reporter, the way he treated you, that was wrong, and it happened in our house. That makes all of us responsible." A small crowd had gathered at a distance, watching this unexpected interaction unfold. Among them was Jenny, who had tears in her eyes as she watched one of the most famous athletes in the world treat her friend with genuine respect and kindness. "Mr. Curry, you don't need to apologize for anything," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's not on you." "Maybe not, but I can do something about it," Steph replied. "And I'd like to, if you'll let me." Before Marcus could ask what he meant, Rick Patterson appeared, having spotted his opportunity. With Dave trailing behind, camera rolling, Rick inserted himself into the conversation with all the subtlety of a freight train. "Stephen, Rick Patterson, Channel 7 Sports. What brings you to the arena so early today?" Steph turned to face Rick, and the temperature in the corridor seemed to drop 10 degrees. The easy smile was gone, replaced by something much more intense. "Actually, I came here because of you," Steph said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge. Rick, completely missing the warning signs, beamed with self-satisfaction. "Fantastic. I'd love to get your thoughts on today's upcoming game, the team's playoff." "Positioning?" "No," Steph interrupted. "I want to talk about what you just did to this man." He gestured toward Marcus, who was standing quietly, still processing the surreal turn his day had taken. Rick's confident expression faltered slightly, but his reporter's instincts kicked in. "Oh, that was just some light-hearted interaction with the arena staff. You know, human interest content." "Human interest?" Steph's voice carried a dangerous quiet. "Is that what you call humiliating a hard-working man on live television?" The corridor at Chase Center had become an impromptu amphitheater. Word had spread throughout the arena that Stephen Curry was confronting the reporter who had humiliated Marcus, and staff members, early arriving fans, and even some Warriors front office personnel had gathered at a respectful distance. Phones were recording from every angle, capturing what was about to become one of the most shared sports moments of the year. Rick Patterson, still failing to read the room, attempted to maintain his professional composure. "Stephen, I think there might be some misunderstanding here. I was simply—" "There's no misunderstanding," Steph cut him off, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a leader. "I watched the whole thing from home. You used your platform, your microphone, your camera to mock and humiliate a man who was simply doing his job. A man who has been nothing but professional and respectful to everyone in this organization." The crowd was dead silent. Even Dave, Rick's cameraman, had stopped recording, sensing that this was a moment that transcended television. "Marcus," Steph continued, turning to address the janitor directly, "how long did you say you've been working here?" "2 years, Mr. Curry," Marcus replied, his voice stronger now, emboldened by the unexpected support. "And in those 2 years, have you ever been anything but professional? Have you ever failed to do your job with excellence?" Marcus started to answer, but Steph wasn't finished. He turned back to Rick, who was beginning to realize that this wasn't going to be the career-boosting interview he'd imagined. "You want to know what I see when I look at Marcus Williams?" Steph's voice carried throughout the corridor. "I see a man who shows up every day, who takes pride in his work, who treats everyone with respect regardless of their position. I see someone who understands that every job in this organization matters, that every person contributes to making this place special." Rick tried to interrupt. "Look, if I offended anyone—" "You didn't offend anyone," Steph said firmly. "You humiliated someone, on live television, for entertainment, because you thought it would make good TV to tear down a man who couldn't fight back." The weight of Steph's words was beginning to sink in, not just for Rick, but for everyone watching. This wasn't just a celebrity defending an employee. This was a masterclass in leadership and human decency. "Marcus," Steph said, placing a hand on the older man's shoulder, "I'd like you to be my guest at tonight's game. Not in the upper level, not in some corner. I want you and your family courtside. I want everyone in this arena to see the respect you deserve." Marcus's eyes filled with tears. In 30 years of working in sports venues, no one had ever acknowledged him like this, let alone one of the game's greatest players. "Mr. Curry, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Steph replied with a genuine smile. "Just bring your family and enjoy the game." Then Steph turned back to Rick, and his expression hardened again. "As for you, I think you owe Marcus an apology. A real one. On camera." Rick looked around at the crowd, at Dave behind the camera, at the dozens of phones recording his every move. His career instincts told him to fight back, to assert his journalistic prerogatives, but even he could see that this was a battle he couldn't win. Marcus, I apologize if my questions came across as disrespectful," Rick began, but Steph shook his head. "That's not an apology," Steph said. "That's a non-apology. Try again." The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Rick's face was red, his composure completely shattered. Finally, he looked directly at Marcus. "Marcus, I'm sorry. What I did was wrong. You didn't deserve to be treated that way, and I had no right to mock your work or your dedication. I was completely out of line." Marcus, displaying the grace that had sustained him through decades of similar treatment, nodded quietly. "I accept your apology, Mr. Patterson." But Steph wasn't finished. He pulled out his phone and right there in front of everyone began typing. "What are you doing?" someone in the crowd called out. "Something I should have done a long time ago," Steph replied. Within seconds, his social media accounts lit up with a post that would be seen by millions. "Today I met Marcus Williams, who has been keeping Chase Center spotless for 2 years, with nothing but professionalism and pride. After watching him get disrespected on live TV, I wanted everyone to know that this is what a champion looks like. Every job matters. Every person deserves respect." Respect. The work. Chase Center. Warriors. The post included a photo of Steph and Marcus together, both smiling, with Marcus's cleaning cart visible in the background, not as a source of shame, but as a symbol of honest work and dignity. Within hours, the post had millions of views, shares, and comments. But more importantly, it sparked a conversation about respect, dignity, and the value of all work. Other athletes began sharing their own stories about the unsung heroes in their organizations. Fans started thanking arena workers, stadium staff, and service employees they encountered. That evening, Marcus Williams sat courtside at Chase Center with his wife of 25 years, Maria, and their teenage daughter, Sophia, when the arena announcer introduced him as a Chase Center champion. During a timeout, the entire crowd gave him a standing ovation that lasted nearly 2 minutes. Steph scored 35 points that night, but after the game, all he wanted to talk about was Marcus. "You know what's funny?" Steph told reporters in his post-game interview. "People always ask me about being a role model, about using my platform responsibly. Today I realize that Marcus Williams has been modeling character and dignity every single day, for 2 years, and nobody was paying attention until someone tried to tear him down. Maybe we should be paying more attention to the right people." As for Rick Patterson, his segment became a cautionary tale about the power of media and the responsibility that comes with it. While he kept his job, the incident became a defining moment in his career, not for his supposed journalistic prowess, but for his lack of basic human decency. But the real transformation belonged to Marcus Williams. Not because his job changed. He continued to clean Chase Center with the same pride and professionalism as always. The transformation was in how he was seen, how he was valued, and how his example inspired others to treat service workers with the respect they had always deserved. 3 months later, Marcus was invited to speak at a Warriors community event about dignity in work and respect for all people. As he stood at the podium, looking out at an audience that included players, executives, and community leaders, he remembered that morning when a reporter had tried to make him feel small. "Someone once asked me what I do for a living," Marcus began, his voice steady and proud. "I clean. I maintain. I take care of the place where dreams come true for millions of fans, and where young men achieve greatness. I make sure that when Stephen Curry steps on that court, when families come to enjoy a game together, when visitors see our arena for the first time, everything is perfect. That's not a small job. That's not meaningless work. That's being part of something bigger than myself. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Later that evening, as Marcus finished his shift at Chase Center, he found a note taped to his cleaning cart. It was from Steph Curry. "Marcus, thank you for showing all of us what real class looks like. The way you handled that situation, the grace you showed, the dignity you maintained. That's championship character. This organization, this team, this community is better because you're part of it. Keep being an example for all of us. Steph." Marcus folded the note carefully and put it in his wallet, right next to a photo of his family. As he pushed his cart through the empty arena one more time, he hummed that same Marvin Gaye tune from the morning. But now there was something different in his voice. It was the sound of a man who knew his worth, who had seen kindness triumph over cruelty, and who understood that sometimes the most powerful victories happen not on the court, but in the quiet moments when people choose to treat each other with dignity and respect. The arena lights dimmed, but the lesson from that day would shine on. In every interaction between players and staff, in every moment when someone with power chose to lift up rather than tear down, and in the simple truth that every person, regardless of their job title, deserves to be treated with respect. Because as Marcus Williams learned that day, and as Stephen Curry reminded the world, we are all more than our job descriptions. We are all worthy of dignity. And sometimes it takes a superstar to remind us that the real champions are the people who show up every day, do their jobs with pride, and treat others with kindness, even when no one is watching. 6 months after the incident, Chase Center implemented a new program called Warriors Behind the Warriors, highlighting the stories and contributions of arena staff, from security guards to concession workers to maintenance crew. Marcus Williams became the program's first featured employee, and his story was displayed prominently in the arena's main concourse. Rick Patterson, after months of negative publicity and professional consequences, eventually wrote a public letter to Marcus, apologizing more fully and announcing his decision to volunteer with organizations serving working-class communities. While his career never fully recovered from the incident, he later said it was the most important lesson he'd ever learned about the power and responsibility of media. Stephen Curry continued to be a vocal advocate for treating all people with dignity, often mentioning in interviews that some of his greatest teachers about character and resilience were not fellow athletes, but the everyday heroes who work behind the scenes to make sports possible. And Marcus Williams? He continued to clean Chase Center with the same pride and professionalism as always, but now he did so knowing that his work was seen, valued, and respected by millions of people around the world. His story became a reminder that dignity is not determined by job title, that respect should be universal, and that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one who chooses kindness over cruelty. The cleaning cart still rolled through the halls of Chase Center every morning, but now it carried with it a legacy of dignity, respect, and the simple truth that every job matters, every person has value, and every act of kindness has the power to change the world.